Well, after 3 weeks of storylines, of reporting, of back and forth, of this is going to get done, Correa needs the Mets need Correa, it's all going to happen. The ending none of us expected. Carlos Correa? Yeah, third team of one off season. He's going back to the Twins. We're going to discuss that on today's surprising edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter, @FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, the Minnesota Twins get their guy. They first watch him go to the Giants, 13 years, $350. Failed physical. Well, whatever you want to call it. A difference of opinions on a physical. Same thing happens with the Mets. $315 million, gone. He ends up landing with the Twins, 6 years, $200 million. Now, based on average annual value, nice deal for Correa. Uptick in AAV. You go from 26 and change, I believe, with the Mets to over $33 million, getting close to Francisco Lindor territory. Now, according to Jeff Passan, contract could max out at $270 million. So assuming the first 6 years are guaranteed with the $200 million, that's the $33 a year. And then maybe there's two more $35 million options on it is my guess that might vest based on games played potentially. So then if it's an 8-year, $270 million contract, well, even with that, you're looking at a deal that was $45 million less in guaranteed value than what the Mets were putting forth. Now, we don't know the details yet. We don't know how the negotiations broke down. We don't know if the Mets had a similar contract on the table, if they only wanted to guarantee the first four. We have no idea. And I'm sure all of those reports are going to unfold over the next 24 hours, and then we can dissect them. But this is just breaking down gut reaction, what just happened, which is after all the promise, after Steve Cohen said this is the last piece that takes us over the top. After all of the stories that continued to say Correa's come to the Mets, after he put his kid in an a hot dog pretzel New York shirt, I love New York, taking the kid to work. They're all of that drama, and I'm sorry if I'm amused that's what you're reading on my face, but I legitimately love good stories in baseball, and even though the Mets in some ways get the raw, end of the stick here, they also avoid the risk of what Carlos Correa brings. And obviously, I'd prefer Correa to have signed with the Mets and to have that type of a team. But it's just insane. I mean, this is one of the most incredible free agent stories we've ever seen. To see a guy sign with 3 different teams in one off season. That doesn't happen. That is a rarity. And he can be fantastic over the next 6 years. And the Twins might have just got the piece that they can build their franchise around. They already have the uncertain health of Byron Buxton. But if the two of those guys can stay healthy on a given season, they can go on a run and win a World Series. So it makes sense for them. For the Mets, I think you got to trust this ownership in this front office. You got to at this point, because what they've done other than this was still enough moves, I believe, to be right back in the position they were in last year. You could say, okay, that wasn't good enough. They were a 101 win team. The Mets go out right now. If I could sign on a dotted line that says they're going to win 101 wins again, 101 games again, everyone's going to sign and say, we want that. And you bring back the same lineup from last year without any other moves, and they are still probably not done. They're now going to have to pivot here. We'll discuss that in a little bit. But I think the pitching staff has improved. The lineup is the same with the possible escalators of a Brett Beatty, of a Mark Vientos, of a Francisco Alvarez, hell, of even Ronnie Mauricio. These prospects that could move the needle for the Mets next season. All of that is still in place where this team should be fine without Carlos Correa. Does not overshadow or diminish the fact that this is still a very disappointing day if you're a Mets fan. Because we were, for a minute, able to dream on an infield that would have been defensively one of the best we've ever seen. With Correa and Lindor on the same side of the infield, that would have been sensational. With Jeff McNeil at second base, with Lou Guillorme coming off the bench, the team was going to be very special. And offensively, I'd be surprised if they got another bat in here that is as established and as good as Carlos Correa. Because, Brian Reynolds is on the trade market. They're asking for, a Chiefs ransom to get him. Are you really going to make that move? And if not that, what else is really out there? So maybe it's just signing out Duvall and rolling with what you got. But nothing is going to be as sexy as Carlos Correa in a Mets uniform would have been. With that said, I don't think that this diminishes everything the Mets accomplished this offseason. It's just unfortunate because you really got the sense throughout this entire process that one way or another, he was going to be it was not until the last 24 hours where the Twins really kind of became real. Where we thought, okay, is Boras still just trying to create some leverage, or is there more to it? And there was as many reports saying that he was going to end up with the Mets that there were that the Twins were legit. But when Ken Rosenthal said that the Twins were in it, that's when we should have taken notice. And ultimately, that's what ended up happening. I want to kind of go through that angle of the story actually a little more in just a minute. First, though, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. The Mets were plus 700 to win the World Series. Now, what are those odds going to be? You got to imagine they get a little bit longer without Correa in the mix. If you want to find out, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Carlos Correa ends up going to the Twins, comes out of nowhere, so to speak. This whole story has been so weird. The first week was just nothing but excitement. You just thought the way the offseason's going, oh wow, Giants see an issue in the medical, whatever. Mets are in, they got him. Infield set for the next decade, love to see it. And that's just, there was no room for pessimism in the first couple of days, even though we all should have kind of thought about the fact that the Giants are a really well-run franchise, and it's out of character for them to make a big blunder. And so there was more to the medicals than we thought, right? Then that whole story transpires. There's the breakdown, but there's always this thought that the Mets need Correa needs the Mets. Something is going to happen here. The reporting throughout, you have the John Heymans, who is clearly speaking for Scott Boras. Andy Martino at times could be a voice for the Mets. When the Athletic starts talking, you should usually listen, which is funny because Jim Bowden was very strong on the side that Correa was going to land with the Mets. But that didn't happen. Yet Ken Rosenthal comes out with a Twins angle, and you have to start to pay attention, and look what ended up happening. And then on top of that, who breaks the story? None other than Jeff Passan, who only reports concrete stuff. So when you're getting your baseball news, there's the Carlos Baerga, is that how you pronounce it? Who's breaking stories left and right from his Instagram, I think. You have the MLB scoops of the world on Twitter that aren't even real. And then you got some of these reporters that you can count on, that you can trust. And when Passan says that he's a twin, you can take that to the bank that he will now be a twin. Although it still says pending a physical. So, what's next? He fails that one, and then the Pirates get in the fray for $80 million over 4 years. I don't know. I think that this is at a point now where the years are little enough with the 6-year deal that it's guaranteed, and the Twins want this bad enough that this is going to go through. And, the Mets aren't going to circle back on it, and they got to move on. And that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to transition away from Carlos Correa when it felt so certain that he was going to be starting at third base, contending for Gold Gloves and Silver Sluggers, and batting somewhere in the top 5 of your lineup, most likely. Now, what's left? Well, Eduardo Escobar is not a bad fallback option, okay? You can count on 20 home runs. You can hope for 25. And, even though I don't find him to be a great defender, he's also not terrible over there. He's solid. He'll make the plays hit to him. Maybe at this point in his career, the range is a little bit diminished, and sometimes there's plays that other third basemen would make, and the defensive metrics don't love him. But ultimately, he's fine. Like, if you're looking at a 2-win third baseman, that's what you can expect, and that's pretty good in Major League Baseball. Now, obviously, you're about to get a player that in the right season can be a 5-6 WAR player. So where are you getting those 4 extra wins? Brett Beatty could be the starting third baseman at some point, and he has a bat that, man, if everything broke right, could be like a Correa. And when he reaches his full potential, if we're talking about long term, Beatty could be a better hitter than Carlos Correa if things break the way that they're honestly trending to. He's a really highly touted prospect who I think has a swing that should translate very, very well to Major League pitching. So I think Beatty is what makes this easier to swallow, because you still think you have your future third baseman in place, and now you just give him a chance here. I think that's ultimately your best road, is to trust the youth. Because I don't know what's on the trade market to really improve the team, and in particular that position. I just don't know where the third baseman is that you can pluck to plop right in and say that's going to be a lot better than Eduardo Escobar and Brett Beatty. I mean, I know for a fact for just baseball, we're doing our top 10 third basemen. And I'm going through the list on my head, any of them being available. You're looking at Machado, you're looking at Arenado, they're not going anywhere. You're looking at Devers, Bregman, they're not going anywhere. Correa, obviously, is a shortstop again. Matt Chapman, last year of his deal, but the Blue Jays are trying to win. Suarez isn't leaving the Mariners. They're trying to win. There's just not a lot out there. Drury already signed. Maybe that would have been an option for the Mets, but they were in the middle of negotiating with Correa. He signs with the Angels. So I don't know if you're going to find an upgrade at third base that's better than rolling the dice this season with Beatty and Vientos, really. I mean, an outside chance if he can, improve enough defensively this offseason to be able to hang at the position. Ronnie Mauricio, another guy that's in the periphery, right? Had an amazing winter season here in the Dominican, MVP out there. He could get some reps at third base this season, or at least play shortstop in Syracuse. And if he hits well enough, maybe he makes that type of a transition. So there's prospects, and they have the floor of an Escobar. I think that's pretty good at third base. It's just a matter of wanting to get more for your lineup, wanting to improve offensively. And I think the clearest path, again, to that improvement is just internal growth. Because you're returning an outfield that I think is good. Yes, you can bring in Adam Duvall to split time with Mark Canha. Love that move. But there's also some reporting out there that I think Duvall might be holding out for the Braves because they might be trying to clear money themselves or clear options from their cluttered outfield to try to make room for a Duvall reunion. So is he going to be interested in going to the Mets if he maybe feels a certain connection to the Braves? Maybe not. And if that's off the table, where else are you going? I guess the one move the Mets could make if they just decided that they had to, right? That they felt like this team needs another bat, they could go and they could dive headfirst into the Brian Reynolds sweepstakes. I just don't know what it costs to get him. And I just wonder what that fit necessarily is, because unless the move is make it a 3-team deal and try to get some prospects from another contending team for like a Mark Canha, and so you can try to make things work. I just don't see the value in trading prospects for an upgrade over Canha, but not a absolute slam dunk significant one. Like, yes, Brian Reynolds is a better hitter and he should be a better defender in left field ultimately, but I don't think that Mark Canha is a hole on your roster either, is my point. Upgrade in player, but in function, I just don't know. And again, it's not a one-for-one swap here. It's not saying, what I'm saying is I don't know if I would give up Brett Beatty or Francisco Alvarez if that's their freaking asking price for Reynolds, because they're crazy right now in Pittsburgh. I don't know if I give up on one of those two prospects that I view as can't miss for a guy that maybe gets you an extra couple wins over Mark Canha. That's my overall point. So regardless, look, the Mets are going to be reeling for a little bit here. They thought they had another superstar into the mix. Ultimately, I think they have enough. But you also know that Steve Cohen's going to want to show some kind of a pivot. And we can never count the Mets out to make a move that surprises us. Because it all started 2 o'clock in the morning when they nabbed Correa in the first place. So we'll see what's next. I'm sure there's going to be a lot to discuss from this. I don't want to waste too much time on this particular show because we're going to get more information, and that's only going to color our opinions and what they're doing more. So I'll hold out for that. For now, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, @Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, @Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Prospects, hosted by Lindsey Crosby. Locked On MLB Prospects is where you want to go to learn about the stars of tomorrow. You can follow Locked On MLB Prospects on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.